Welcome back, folks, to hashtag SIL USA. That's Strategies in Light, Greg.
That's right. 2020, we're here.
Coming out of San Diego. Of course, this episode of the live stream. And all the live streams this week are brought to you by the one call does it all, baby, Bill Brown Sales.
Hey, Mike, name a lighting component.
A socket.
Socket. Bill Brown's got it. Name another one.
A little ballast strap.
Sure, Bill Brown probably has.
Yeah, for sure.
If it goes in a light fixture, Bill Brown's
got it. One call does it all. Go to BillBrownSales.com. They're here at the event. Their booth's right over there by the front door. So if you're watching this in your hotel room or whatever, don't forget to check out BillBrownSales.com. Robert, thank you for joining us at the live stream.
My pleasure.
Well, we got off to a good start earlier, and then we put pause on it because we thought we don't want to wreck the event. Tell us a little bit why you're at Strategies and why the event is important in the lighting calendar.
Well, I've been paying attention to strategies in light ever since LEDs became an option for lighting. I came out of the semiconductor world and became interested in LEDs for general lighting. So I was in at the ground floor, and now I'm trying to figure out where it's going to be going from now on.
The name of your talk was called The End of, what was it?
End of the SSL Revolution.
Or a New Beginning.
Or a New Beginning.
So, you know,
we're going to go right into it.
LEDs are known as a destructive technology. LEDs have destroyed the incandescent bulb.
Creative destruction.
Well, yeah. If I use the Joseph Schumpeter phrase, creative destruction, the LEDs were created and in the process destroyed many aspects of the traditional lighting industry. Of course, we still have troffers, we still have recessed cans, we still have sockets, and we still have bulbs. But a lot of the value proposition of incumbent lighting sources has been destroyed by LED technologies through their long lifetime, potentially, as well as their energy efficiency. So whereas many organizations have looked at, for example, lighting controls to save energy on lighting, we've gotten to the point now where lighting, at least in principle, is so energy efficient that you can't afford to pay for the controls anymore with the energy saved by lighting. So it begs the question of what is the control industry going to do? Now
they're going to have another boom bust cycle.
They're going to have another boom bust cycle.
I mean, there's been 3 in my career. I've talked about it 3 times in my career. So I started in 2000.
Okay.
There was the introduction of dual technology into controls, right? Then there was like the Encilium, plug it in with the Cat 5. And then there was now IoT. And I just think it's going to bust.
I tend to agree with you, but I think it's going to have a resurgence from connected sensors in building controls for other energy saving opportunities that aren't lighting related, but the sensors and the systems that will be developed for things like HVAC energy savings and controls for smart buildings, lighting modules will be able to plug into that, and we'll get lighting control for free because the energy saved by more efficient HVAC in smart buildings has an energy payback that will basically justify the control cost. Whereas the energy saved by controlling LED lighting can no longer justify the control cost. Now, having said that, there's still a lot of demand for lighting controls, and people are still chasing that path. But I'm afraid that a lot of the things that people are chasing are kind of, how do I want to say, it's like a hangover from the incandescent bulb era. And we just can't get out of our own way fast enough to change the regulations and the requirements for lighting control systems because we're not getting energy savings from the incandescent bulb like we used to. We have highly efficient LED light sources now that some people might say just leave them on.
Is the energy story over, like for lighting? Is like I feel like, lighting has led the way for 20 years, even before LEDs, with high efficiency fluorescent has led the energy efficiency story in the world. Like, I would say most of the energy efficiency gains that are related to fast paybacks have something to do with lighting.
So that's correct, and I would say that it's my assessment as an LED chip guy that LED lighting efficiency is kind of peaked. It's very, very good right now. The LED chip guys don't want to make the investment to make it any better. And I think what we're going to see is the value add from lighting is going to come from other things, and we're looking at the other things that lighting can do.
Why
that
does
might be
lighting
valuable.
why does lighting think it's going to be the hub of the IoT? Like the lighting industry has this feeling that the hub is going to be lighting.
They
Do you
thought that
agree with
they-
that? Do you agree with that?
Oh, I believe that the lighting industry believes that.
Yes, that's what I mean. Why do we
And
believe that?
They believe it because they thought they could control the power distribution. They had the energy and the vantage point for driving sensors that found out where people were and what they needed. So I actually wrote a piece on this for the IES Fires series, and that is that the lighting companies came at it from a perspective of, I own the ceiling, I own the power distribution in the ceiling, and there's no better place for sensors. So I should own connected lighting and the IoT of
Or
things.
connected buildings.
Well, yeah, but if I put all the sensors in the ceiling and I do what Cisco calls the digitized ceiling,
Mm-hmm.
lighting companies are in a position to drive that because they own the power distribution, they have the placement, they just have the real estate in the ceiling.
Mm.
But lighting companies didn't really have a value proposition driven by energy savings through controls. Not only that, they're not experts on IoT, networking, these kinds of
Some of them aren't
control
experts
systems.
in lighting either.
True.
That may be the case, but I think that maybe they were a little bit too ahead of the time, in my opinion. You have people like Enlighted that were looking to put PIR sensors into their light fixtures to sense occupancy, and they developed a really nice system around trying to figure out where people were and what they were doing. But the problem that a lot of people had with that product was that, hey, I just installed LED lighting. Now you're telling me I have to tear it out because it's supposed to last 10 years and put your system in with a sensor.
Yeah.
So
Tough nut.
it's a very tough nut. I think that we're still going to see sensors in the lights, but more increasingly, I think we're going to see sensors just in the ceiling, independent of the lights. And they're going to be around for doing other things like measuring occupancy.
I have a theory. I think that the IoT of Things, as you call it, I like to call it that too. The IoT of Things, because it's the Internet of Things, right? But I like to call it that as well, the IoT of Things, because it kind of describes it sarcastically on purpose in a way. I kind of like it that way. But there's a, I lost my train of thought here, Greg. Where was I? Yeah. Oh man. I had a great point to make.
IoT of Things.
Hang on a second.
Okay.
But what I was going to say was we'll see the IoT of Things take off when the person that gets the information pays for the controls.
Yeah, and that's going to happen.
You think so? You think like the information will ever be so valuable that the person collecting it will want to pay for the control system to be there?
Yes, and that's going to happen, but it's going to happen with tangible ROI from energy or from other quantifiable efficiencies of operation. So, for example, if I install a system to measure occupancy and I can tie that to the control of advanced HVAC distribution systems, I can, improve the energy efficiency of the HVAC system in a building by up to 30%.
Mm-hmm.
And so that kind of a sensor network will generate information about where people are and estimate what they're doing to control heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. And 30% energy savings is huge for a building operator.
Sure.
And the power companies will drive that.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's still a value proposition for occupancy sensing and connected sensors and machine learning algorithms and all the stuff that goes along with it, so that a sentient building, if you will, and there's a company actually named Sentient Buildings now, can take a look and say, well, I know where my people are, I know what they're doing, I know what their services need to be, I can allocate meeting space, I can allocate resources dynamically in real time based on knowing where my people are. I don't use cameras, so nobody has to be worrying about being spied upon, but advanced sensor networks in buildings will generate that data that will be valuable with a tangible payback in terms of building control systems.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, you can do lighting control too. That's almost like a freebie add-on.
Sure.
In the event that spectrally tunable lighting becomes popular for human health and well-being, in the event that something like Li-Fi becomes important for being able to get improved bandwidth for internet connectivity, these things that lighting companies are looking at as possible future value propositions. But the control network is going to be valuable because of non-lighting related value propositions, in my opinion.
And I agree with that. I think there's some, I was just in an office building the other week where people are covering their screens and doing all this. So there's a couple sides of controls. There's the occupancy side, and there's the dimming side, and light levels, right? And I think it's hard to do a payback from that, although you save some energy when you dim. But I think that's going to be more and more important for people's comfort and for their production and everything that goes along with it, is getting the light they want. I can tell you how happy the people were that we put this in, these fixtures in that could dim, and they could personally dim it, and they saw it over their own screen, and it was like, that sold the project alone. They didn't care about the savings.
Correct. So some time ago, Jennifer Veach up in Canada did a study on what people liked about controllable lighting, and that was their ability to set it themselves. They felt empowered.
Yes.
And the value proposition there isn't energy savings from the lighting, it's worker retention.
Yeah.
And that's a value proposition that is quantifiable. In fact, modern building practitioners and real estate people are looking at things like the wellness standards for buildings, because if they build a well building, they're basically saying that if you have this building with these controls, tunable lighting, good HVAC, and other kinds of things, you will retain your workers. And you've heard of the 330-300 rule, right? You get your money from a well-trained workforce that's productive and how you actually retain them. So control systems that provide services for people that keep them happy, productive, and comfortable, and save energy through things like HVAC and other building operations. These are the things that will pay for the controls. The lighting, it's kind of left out in the cold because it's too energy efficient now.
In your presentation talk, it says the evolution of micro-LED displays can enable a future fusion of illumination and video technologies.
So, unlike a lot of my colleagues who actually have to meet quarterly sales goals or work in real industry, I'm at the university. My product are well-trained students. So when I was asked to consider giving this talk, and I found that I was talking right after Jim Benya, who's talking about a very similar topic, I said, well, okay, we've got this amazing industry now that's developed LEDs, and they're squeezing every photon they can out of them and trying to make them really low cost. Now, they can't make any margins on making LEDs for lighting anymore, so they're going into new business areas. So they're going into micro LEDs for displays. Now, there's an interesting energy play, because in principle, if you can make a cost-effective micro LED display, it will be much more energy efficient than an OLED display or an LCD display.
Sure.
And one big energy consumption sector of electrical energy use in buildings in this country, even in residential in this country, is the explosion of the number of displays we have around. So let's think about it for a second. How can we take a look at micro LED technology for displays be used in the lighting industry? Well, one of the things that the micro LED guys have to do is to figure out how to come up with really low cost assembly technologies to make really cheap sheets of small LEDs available for displays. I mean, how can I make a micro LED TV, say a 4K or even an 8K TV, with a price point of maybe $600?
Can you define micro LED versus, I'm guessing it's the size, right?
So a micro LED, well, let's take a look at it this way. If you take a look up close with a magnifying glass at your LCD TV, you see little pixels.
Okay. And
you can see the little red, green, and blue spots that make up the display. Right now, those pixels are generated by filtering different colors of light through a light switch. That's the liquid crystal. What if I could make every one of those little pixels its own LED? So I could just turn the light on and off. What would I get? Well, I get much faster switching. I get much better contrast ratio. And because I'm not throwing light away going through an LCD crystal, I get much higher display efficiency. So I can come up in principle with a much better display.
Okay.
Now, if I can make it cost effectively, I can make big sheets of LEDs for display purposes. So where does that get me? Well, let's say that what I can do is actually make a luminous display bright enough that it's actually a window or a skylight. It actually generates enough light to be a light, but when I look at it, I see clouds going by and a blue sky.
You're talking about, so we did a podcast with Cree,
Yeah.
And they talked about their Circadian fixture,
Mhm.
which mimics the sun. And you're saying that. So I have a sense like, you know how you can grow coral with 10,000 Kelvin bulbs and stuff like that. You have these coral growing lamps, right?
Mhm.
And so you're basically tricking the coral into thinking it's sunlight in a way. Are we going to be sophisticated enough to not cause harm, yet improve human health with electric light?
I think it'll take some care, but I think we're learning more and more about the impact of lighting on living things, on plants and on people, animals, that I think that with attention to detail, we'll be able to do that. Now, skeptics might say that, even the invention of the electric light bulb back in the early 1900s, late 1800s, early 1900s, completely destroyed how people sleep at night, because it created this artificial light that kept people awake at night and they couldn't sleep. And maybe in some way that really changed how people developed socially and perhaps even
There's a
medically.
book called Disenchanting the Night.
Mhm.
But you ever read that book, Bush? It's a German book. It was translated into English.
No, I haven't read that book.
It's an interesting one. He talks about how humans. It's an anthropological study of of artificial light, sort of. And he talks about the difference in cities when there was electric light versus without electric light,
Right.
and how the night was mystified. And there's like this Midsummer Night's Dream element to night that we've lost.
Mhm.
The imaginariness. It doesn't just affect our sleep, but it affects our dreams.
Well, I don't know how far we could go with that, but there was another book talking about the development of incandescent lighting in the market called The Age of Edison.
Hmm.
And in this particular book, they had a section that was devoted to how the ubiquity of incandescent lights in the early 1900s really changed how people behaved at night. It extended their daytime. They went to sleep later.
We're animals. Like at the end of the day, you could zoologically study humans.
Mhm.
We're going to behave in certain ways.
Well, crazily sometimes, yes.
Yeah, no. It's like, I'll tell you this, casinos have known for decades that if you shine bright white light in someone's eyes, they'll give you their paycheck.
Well, that's true.
I mean, they've known how to hurt the circadian rhythm for a long time.
They've known how to.
A casino is basically a giant circadian rhythm disruptor.
They know how to take your money.
Yeah, using light.
Well, they use a lot of different things,
Yeah, sure.
including alcohol and
Light,
other kinds of things. But the light will have an impact on people, and I think that one of the big areas for lighting right now to do research on is control of spectrum for circadian rhythm regulation. It's a complex topic. I think there's some very interesting work being done by companies now on trying to figure out exactly how to manage the light spectrum to minimize circadian disruption and things of that nature. That may be one area where lighting will have to adjust in the future to keep people healthy. That's one area where lighting is going to develop in terms of, say, what's next in terms of the LED lighting revolution. But the real question is, people have had non-circadian lighting now for over 100 years.
Mm-hmm. Generations.
But life expectancy's gone up. People are doing well.
Don't get all Steven Pinker on me now. I mean, that guy always says, hey, everything's getting better. Everything's getting better. There's a sense among most people that, yes, we're living longer. Mm-hmm. Yes, we have. But, we basically are in 1984 now. I mean, our TVs literally watch us. Like George Orwell's prediction has come true.
Well, let's take it back to lighting for a second, though. All I'm saying is that we've had not really good circadian lighting for over 100 years.
Sure.
And it never really caused any major problem. So the question is there a value proposition in providing people with circadian lighting if it only benefits a few % of the people some of the time?
Explain that.
Well, I may not be able to get to sleep at night because I had a problem with a child.
Oh, right. Yeah, you're stressed out.
Or stressed out or whatever.
Some combination of factors.
So,
I think most people can't sleep because they're not tired. I think that's my opinion.
There's some basic rules about circadian lighting. You need to get enough light during the daytime in the right spectrum to shut down melatonin, and you need to.
Do you know how much that is?
I can't quote the numbers right now.
Let me ask you.
Physiologist.
Okay, so let me ask you this. So my whole life, I've been told that the sun is bad for me. that I should wear sunscreen and sunglasses, and I should avoid the sun as much as possible. And I find it interesting that, oh yeah, now we're going to bring the sunshine inside. So does that mean that, and I'm not being pithy here, I'm being serious. Like, is the sun good for us or is it bad for us? Or is it like, well, too much of anything is bad, so take it in doses?
Well, look, people have had axes to grind for their own particular discipline for a long period of time. If you talk to a dermatologist, sunlight is poison. If you talk to a person that likes the sunlight and talks about vitamin D,
Yeah.
The sun is good for you in small doses because the wavelengths of sunlight that cause vitamin D generation are the same wavelengths of sunlight that cause skin cancer. So it's a question of balance and trade-off. There's an interesting paper written in Europe probably about 10 years ago about the beneficial non-vitamin D impacts of UV light.
The
And it turns
beneficial
out that-
non-vitamin D benefit. Okay, yeah.
So it turns out that UV light, when it's absorbed by tissue, can have beneficial
Oh, you're talking about
physiological effects.
non-visible UV light too.
Well,
Ultra.
UV light is technically not really visible, although some people can actually see it.
Right.
And
Talking about IR though, infrared too.
well, infrared light feels warm. We like
Yeah.
it. But there are real physiological impacts of UV light, and say around 380, 390 nanometers in terms of dilating blood vessels and making you feel more relaxed. So it's going to be interesting to see as we understand more about how light spectrum impacts people, what we really need to do in terms of providing the spectrum that's required to make people healthier. But there's so many things that we don't understand right now. But again, the question is, how can I measure the health impact? Can I quantify it? Is there actually going to be value there? Is it really going to make people's life better to the point they're going to pay extra for it? Or are we going to be happy with just okay lighting because it's not going to make me live another 5 or 10 years longer? And I may not really find out until I'm 80 or 85 years old whether or not the lighting was a problem for me anyway.
Sure.
So it's a value proposition thing that makes the quality of light kind of an issue. To me, with the cell phone, it says, I had Philips lighting about a cell phone. And I get it.
It's not a consumer product.
It's not a consumer product. And for that reason, I have an office. I'm in a lighting research center. I have an office where I have color temperature mismatched T8 bulbs.
On purpose?
On purpose.
Fluorescent or LED?
Fluorescent.
T8.
People come into my offices without looking at the ceiling, tell me what kind of lighting I have in here. And they say, I don't know. I didn't look at the lighting. And so I look at the lighting and tell me what you see. Oh, fluorescent tubes. Say, what do you notice about them? Oh, fluorescent tubes. You notice the color doesn't match? Yeah, who cares?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
So I actually installed LED light bulbs in the hallway of our building at RPI because I figured we've got an LED lighting research center. I ought to have
some lights.
You might want to
I
have
ought to
LED.
put some LED bulbs in. So I replaced all the par 30 75 watt incandescents with par 30 LED bulbs.
Now you're talking my language.
Nobody noticed.
Yeah, sure. That's
I
what
had
you
a-
want.
I had to put a sign outside the door saying, look up, that's an LED bulb. And they said, so?
Nobody
Energy
cares
payback.
about lighting. Nobody
Energy
cares.
payback 11
Yeah.
months. I said, so it was really kind of an interesting insight. So yeah, lighting designers care about lighting, but the question is, what can you provide for people? How do you value it? How can you quantify it? And how do you avoid trying to sell a product by selling snake oil? Like, this bulb will make you sleep better at night.
And what about the unintended consequences? What do we not know still? Do we know what light is, Bob? What is it?
Well, speaking as a scientist, it's a section of the electromagnetic radiation spectrum.
Okay, but are we creatures of the light? Like everything seems to come from light in a way. All the energy in the earth.
People would argue that a lot of our biological systems, particularly our circadian rhythms, have been basically developed around the oscillations of daylight through the daytime-nighttime cycle. And
That's the progenitor of life is those rhythms.
those rhythms basically set up biological timing mechanisms all the way down to our individual cells that basically tell the cells when they're supposed to do what.
Mm-hmm.
So, your cells have a circadian rhythm, your heart has a circadian rhythm, your liver has a circadian rhythm. And, the analogy that I like to use that circadian experts tell me is accurate is it's a little bit like an engine. So in an engine, all the parts have to move with the right timing. If they don't have the right timing, then it's not as efficient. It might wear out faster. But when the timing is right, you get maximum efficiency and it lasts longer. Now in your body, all the parts have to have the right timing. If you keep screwing up the timing, then you're not as efficient and the parts may wear out faster. But you can have a car that is not well timed or well tuned. It still runs.
Sure.
You may spend a little bit of extra money on gas or maybe a little bit more money on repairs, but the hassle of getting it tuned all the time just means that you're happy to live with those inefficiencies.
So I read an article that they compare some cities where cars get destroyed quickly and people don't fix their cars because it's not worth it. So I can't remember, it's somewhere in Africa, but they compared the maintenance schedule to an Audi in Africa to this one African town to thing, and people just don't fix it. Let's talk about distribution.
Okay.
This morning you were saying that I asked you an interesting, what I thought was an interesting question, and Greg said you got to ask him that again, and that is, do you guys study the economics of the micro and macroeconomics of the lighting business at all?
So we're in the School of Engineering. I myself am a physical scientist. We have some interactions with people in the School of Economics where they look at things like distribution, business development, and things like that, but we don't really study that directly. I have a lot of discussions with people in the lighting industry because I worked for GE Lighting for a while, and I have started to understand over the years a little bit more about how the lighting market actually works in terms of distribution and channel and things like that. And so, of course, ever since the development of electric lighting, distribution systems, business models, all of this stuff is developed to make sure that we had light pretty much where and when we needed it. Now the question really becomes, with connected lighting, with LED lighting, with value models changing, how is that going to impact distribution? And early LED lighting designers complained that since typically in a building lighting was the last thing thrown into the ceiling, contractors would say, "Oh, what's this LED lighting garbage? I'm just going to go out and buy, fluorescents and throw them in."
Sure.
Because that was the channel they had access to, and that's what they did. And then the lighting designer would show up and say, "Hey, you didn't use any of my stuff."
Yeah.
I think that's changed a lot now, but we still have issues with exactly how the design is realized, how it goes through distribution, and how product actually gets commissioned.
Well, the channel is collapsed.
Yeah.
The traditional channel of manufacturer makes product, wants to keep cash flows high, sells it to the distributor, distributor warehouses it and sells it to the contractor, whatever, like that. That model's collapsed. So you have first of all, you have a lot of distributors that are master distributors that manufacture everything offshore, which is right in China. So they're really distributor to distributor, not manufacturer to distributor directly, right? Then you have a lot of those people coming in, selling direct to the end user and to the contractors and cutting out the channel.
Okay.
Right? There's a bunch of different pressures that have been coming in. I think, in my opinion, I think the channel needs to be reestablished. What do you think, Greg? Like the industry needs to.
Speaking as a lighting distributor, I want it reestablished.
Yeah. Obviously, we're biased here.
No, there is some. It was around for a reason for a long time.
Exactly.
And there's a lot of value in that.
So this is what people sometimes call disintermediation.
Okay.
The channel is breaking down. I wasn't really sure that it had broken down completely. I get some questions from time to time with regard to how distributors can remain relevant. Being an educator, my standard answer is, well, educate your customer and make sure you understand all the new technologies coming so you can provide value-added services to your end user. So that's kind of like motherhood and apple pie.
Sure.
But it's really a big challenge with regard to exactly how LED lighting and now lighting and control is changing things. And it's going to be tied into how lighting designers work and how contractors become much more attuned with the technology that's out there.
Yeah.
So evolution on the construction side and on the contracting side The training of electricians and people who do building installations will allow them to specify product directly from vendors rather than from distribution. I can see that it creates a lot of churn in the market right now,
Mhm.
but I honestly don't know what the right answer to that is, or where we're going to come up with a new normal for how that kind of stuff really works.
I think the lighting industry needs a lot of is going to contract a lot. Companies are going to merge. There's going to be a lot of mergers and acquisitions. I think you're going to see less. You're going to see stronger players emerge on the manufacturing and that side, and you're going to see a lot of the fringe players disappear over the next 5 years. I think you're also going to see a standard emerge for lighting controls that everyone will make intercompatible controls. I think that has to happen as well.
Yeah, but I don't think it's going to be driven by the lighting companies. I think it's actually going to be driven by the people that control the sensors and from the building management side of things.
Like who wants the information is going to control it.
Whoever wants the information. A few years ago, I was asked to talk a little bit about, the smart home. If I saw really things developing in the smart home with connected lighting for residential. And I said, well, I don't know. Alexa's kind of a game changer, but let's draw an analogy to some other kind of a control system that people buy. Let's take a look at home security systems.
Sure.
So market penetration in home security systems has been about 15% of homes. 15%, and it's actually declining. It's basically just cutting edge people that put them in. Of people that have home security systems, only about 50% of them actually use them.
Sure.
It's just a value added resale factor that they put into the home when they get it. And I kind of see that smart lighting is kind of the same thing. It's, people interested to play around with something. It's kind of cool. It might be a value add, but
who wants to receive alerts from their light bulbs?
Nobody. In fact, I don't want to touch my phone to turn on my lights.
Exactly.
If I want to turn off a light with Alexa, that's fine. But,
it's not that exciting.
It's not that exciting. I just don't see anything really there.
I had a guy on my show. He came on. He had a fancy light switch, and God love him. That's great that he invented this light switch. But he's like, "You really think there's going to be light switches in 50 years?" And I said, "Yep, absolutely. Simple technology. Turn off the lights. That's it." And not that I'm in favor of that or I'm pushing that over controls or anything like that. But I think controls are a little bit invasive, and I think maybe there's some control and there's some upgrade fatigue.
So let me take a slightly different point of view on that, and that's kind of what I'll be talking about a little bit on Thursday morning. And again, forgive me, I'm an academic. I like looking at the gee whiz bang stuff.
Sure.
Sometimes I say, you never saw a light ship on the Starship Enterprise. Okay. Why? Because the ship was smart enough to give people exactly what they needed all the time.
Exactly.
So how do we get to control systems that are smart enough to give people what they need in terms of services, including lighting, all the time?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of the research that we're doing at our center. How do I actually build a system that knows where I am, can estimate what I'm doing, can kind of see what's happening and provide me with the light that I need?
So that's an AI machine learning problem, is it not?
It's to a certain degree an AI machine learning problem. To a certain degree, it's a sensor network that knows where I am without being able to see me. That is to say, no cameras. The building is aware.
That's sentient word you use. Sentient.
The building is sentient. I envision a future, and perhaps I said this earlier, where the building says, okay, everybody's home now. They're in their own place. It looks like a normal, Friday afternoon. Everything's good because it knows where people are, can estimate what they're doing, and provide the services that they require to do whatever it is they're undertaking.
That's not a lighting play. That's a
smart building play. Now, who's going to pay for that kind of a system? I don't really know, but where it's going to start to come about, and if we can drive the cost down with those kinds of systems, senior care, elder care, assisted living. If I could have grandma living in her house, but it's sensorized, that can detect deviations from normal behavior without using cameras to keep grandma safe and recognize deviations in performance or deviations in living pattern by tracking movement and timing and things like that. I might be able to create very low cost sentient people tracking systems and service providing systems that will allow people to live properly longer without assisted care or without being put in healthcare homes. So there's a lot of interest in developing control systems for that kind of thing. If we can develop cost-effective, sentient systems that allow us to figure out where people are and what they are doing, and recognize patterns of behavior that allow us to provide services to those people, including lighting and heating and other services. If we can make them cost-effective and maybe even in the future build them into building materials, modular ceilings that just get snapped into a new building with all these sensors built in to know where things are and what's going on, then we'll
You are an
realize.
academic.
Then that's right, I am.
Like
then,
you got your you're thinking. You're trying to think down the road past the sale, of to what how it's going to be. That's a tough one.
It is a tough one, but what it does and what it allows us to do is work on really advanced new sensor systems,
Sure, like blue
machine
water.
learning,
You get you're going to think big about it. You have to drop the lighting word from your name, I think. Just enabled systems.
Well,
sentient enabled systems.
So we've actually kicked around the idea that we're going to rename ourselves the Learning Enabled Systems and Applications, with a little M in front for machine learning.
Yeah.
But
can you artificial intelligence? Let me ask you a question about it.
Yeah.
Can you tell yourself to digest your food?
No.
Right. Can you tell yourself to tan when you get the sun?
No.
So that's all intelligence too, correct?
Well, these are programmed chemical systems that I don't have to think about because they're fully autonomous. And part of the vision that we had for the center in the very beginning was to say, we see autonomous vehicles coming down the road.
Mm-hmm.
What is an autonomous vehicle? It's a bunch of sensors, 4 wheels and a motor,
mm-hmm.
and an embedded expert driver.
Mm-hmm.
So smart buildings, autonomous lighting control. What do I have? I have a building, a ton of sensors, and an embedded building manager and an embedded lighting designer, all built into the system, so that, like the Starship Enterprise without a light switch, you get the right light exactly where and when you need it automatically. So how do we get there, and what technologies do we need to invent to realize these kinds of things? And the reality is, even if we never build it, it's a real good training exercise for students working on advanced systems, controls, novel sensing technologies, and things like that. The other thing that I would add is that a lot of the lighting control systems we have nowadays don't measure light. Yeah, we have ambient light sensors for daylighting, but we have motion detectors to try to figure out what turns on and off. There's a lot of things you can do by actually sensing reflected light that gives you much better opportunities to control lighting and even provide other control data for buildings that don't use PIR. So these are advanced sensor concepts that we're working on all the way down to the new chip level. So we're working on a wide range of topics that allow us to realize new systems to be able to create autonomous control, so that people don't have to worry about thinking about what they want.
Yeah.
And even with VR and AR, systems that can do self-commissioning.
Sure.
So you walk out of the room, the lighting says, okay, it's time to test everything again.
Well, that's what these Circadian skylights are. That's augmented reality. Well, that's what it is.
It is to a certain degree. There's a lot of technology, however, that has to be developed to cost that down. Some of the things that I talk about with MicroLED displays and virtual skylights.
Yeah.
We're getting to the point right now where, I can build a 10,000 nit MicroLED display, and 10,000 nits is about the brightness of the noon sky on a sunny day.
Are you going to put that in a 2x4 troffer?
Maybe someday. Maybe if we watch this technology, we can make it happen.
So folks, we're going to be bringing the sunglasses indoors. This episode of the live stream, thank you, Bob Karlasek.
Right.
I got it right. Junior, PhD, folks, coming out hot from the Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, talking lighting. They got to drop the lighting out of their name because they're going into machine learning and everything. But you know what? Before you do anything else, remember, one call does it all, Greg.
That's right. Bill Brown Sales, over 60 years of service, dedicated service to the lighting industry, and many lines, all components you need for light fixtures.
So go to billbrownsales.com. They're here at Strategies in Light in San Diego. So their booth's right over there by the front door in the exhibit hall. And we are very grateful to you, the listener. Check it out. We will also post some links to Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute along with the podcast here. So if you want to find out more about where Bob works, check it out. Thanks for listening, folks. BillBrownSales.com.